school?
Yeah,
What
I was
grade?
bullied pretty badly. I think elementary school, junior high school, bullied on the bus. Oh, this is where I'm comfortable. Like, I'm comfortable on the stage. I can entertain people. And that's how it started. That's how I became an entertainer, for sure. I mean, I decided in 90.
Greg, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here. How long have you known each other?
Lance, I knew of you for a long time, but in a good way.
You know what I mean?
But I mean, I knew about Lance Lee because, right, you were president of the American Club.
That's right, that's right.
But I think we've probably known each other 15 years.
About.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think
Quite a
so.
while.
Because after the club opened, that's when we started. We almost did that concert together, almost.
Right.
I tell you there was a drop dead date, so I mean.
Right. We almost
I was clear that we almost did it, but a couple
years ago, I was looking at YouTube and I saw this amazing singer on YouTube, a Broadway singer.
That's right, you told me about it.
Right, and then I thought, let's try to bring him to Japan.
Right.
And we were going to do that.
And then I said, no, what about it? You sing. And I said, what about the people we know here?
Yeah,
They can sing.
exactly,
And I said,
exactly.
let's do them. Why do we have to do someone we don't know personally?
That's right, exactly.
But you did get to meet him while you were there, and he was so nice to you, that's what made you think you wanted to bring him over here.
Yeah, he's amazing. His name is Norm Lewis. He was
Right.
the first black Phantom of the Opera on
And
Broadway.
he did a fantastic job.
Oh, he's amazing. He's amazing.
And he's a good
became
person.
friend.
He's a good person, too.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Where were
Yes.
you born?
I was born in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is about 90 minutes from Minneapolis. It's a medium-sized town, around 70,000 people. I grew up there, and
You have siblings?
I do, yeah. I have an older brother who took over my father's business,
Which was?
which was a cleaning business, actually, cleaning
still doing it?
buildings, and he's still doing it, yeah, to this day.
Cleaning buildings.
Yeah, exactly. They have a business that cleans office buildings, exactly.
Okay.
And then my sister, I was the youngest, and my sister also worked back there, is back in my hometown still.
How many years
And, yeah.
between you and the older brother?
3 years each, yeah.
So 6 years between you and your brother?
Yeah, 6 years above me, and then 3 years above me is my sister. And then I'm the youngest. And then we were all singers. We all grew up. My brother was a really great singer. And then my sister was a great singer, so it was just natural that I had to be a singer.
What
'Cause-
about your mother and father?
Well, my father is an interesting person, actually. He was disinherited when he was in his 40s. And his family, he was kind of from a well-known family in Minneapolis. And they sent him to a little town called Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, to get him out of Minneapolis, basically. And that's where he met my mother, who was just 18. So there was a huge age gap between my father and my mother.
Okay.
And he was working in a hospital, and she was working there as well. So my father, she married him, and then, so I grew up with a 24-year age gap of my two parents.
But wait, you said
Yeah.
he was disinherited. Did he? Can you say what he did?
Yeah, he was I grew up in a household with a practicing alcoholic father. He was not a functioning alcoholic. My father, when he drank, he was gone. You know, so we grew up in that kind of a household. So it was, my mom was amazing, and my mom kept it all together. And one of the reasons they cleaned office buildings was because something we could do when my father disappeared, because all the kids would go to work, you know, oh, dad's gone, we go to work. And we did that
You
at
had to go
night.
there. Oh, I'm saying. Oh, so he's. But it was always his business.
It was always his and my mother's business, right?
Okay.
So I grew up as a child, you know, with that in the home. So I always tried to be like a really sort of, you know, nice kid at school, try to make kids, you know, like me, because we had kind of a secret at home. And then growing up as a child, I was picked on as a kid, you know, because of my sexuality, and I was kind of bullied.
What grades are you talking about now?
I was bullied, I mean, from elementary school up until junior high school.
You remember? Okay, so elementary, like what? Second grade, first? No,
I first remember being, I'm not turning into, I don't want it to be a sob story.
No, but
it's just reality, because in Japan, we have a big problem with bullying.
That's a big thing. And
Right.
one of the
And
guys
so-
I just had on the podcast,
Right.
Hinota, wrote a book
About bullying.
about bullying, and he gave a talk at the American Club. So you were
Yeah.
bullied in school.
Yeah,
What
I was
grade?
bullied pretty badly. I think elementary school, junior high school, bullied on the bus, and then I auditioned for a play in I was in ninth grade, and there was auditions for a play, and I thought I should try that. So, and I got cast as like the villain,
Okay.
and I really hammed it up, and we did it in the class auditorium, and suddenly it was like a wave change. Suddenly
You're cool.
I realized, I could act. And the audience, the kids who bullied me, everybody was laughing hysterically. And so I realized in that play in ninth grade, it's like probably a lot of theater kids, because I was a theater kid, oh, this is where I'm comfortable. Like, I'm comfortable on the stage. I can entertain people. And that's how it started. That's how I became an entertainer, for sure. I mean, I decided in ninth grade. And then in high school, I was like the musical guy. And
A musical how?
Auditioning for musical, being in musicals, singing, yeah.
Okay, do you play instruments?
I don't play well, exactly.
Okay.
But I was, a good singer.
Okay.
So my high school theater teacher, her name is Carol Sabota. She's still one of my Facebook friends. And she organized a trip to New York with us theater kids. And we went to New York. It was the first time I ever went to New York City when I was, I think, 17.
17.
And
Had you
the
been
first-
outside of Wisconsin before?
Oh, hardly at all, because my father was an alcoholic. So one of the things was we really couldn't go anywhere because there was a huge, I mean, now it's laughable. At the time, it was dramatic.
Okay, right. What happened?
We couldn't go anywhere because what if we went somewhere and then something happened and it upset my father and he drank, then we couldn't get home. It was so we really hadn't been hardly
By the way,
anywhere.
are your parents still around, both of them?
Yeah, my father passed away when I was 26, when I was living in Hawaii.
Okay, right.
And my mother, who's the real matriarch of our family, kept us all together, is doing really, really well.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
she's still living alone.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, in her
Wisconsin?
90s. I just thankfully just went to go see her.
Oh, that's
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, but so I went to New York. The first show I ever saw was Pippin, Ben Vereen, and he comes out on stage, join us. And I was like mesmerized. So when I was 17, I thought, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to leave Eau Claire. I'm going to move to New York City. I'll become a Broadway actor, which is a story of a lot of theater kids.
But when did you do it? But the people that haven't been in theater, they wouldn't know.
Oh, they wouldn't, I guess,
So
yeah.
so for you, this is
Yeah.
unique. So
This
it's
was-
unique for a
yeah,
lot
exactly.
of people.
Right.
So when did you do it? When did you leave?
So what I did was
well, you graduated from high school.
I graduated from high school, and my aunt and uncle, who had disinherited my father, made up with my father, and they felt guilty. So they said, we'll pay for your kids' tuition to any school. So
kind
what
of
a
work
blessing.
Did they do? What kind of work did they do?
Interesting, yeah. Well, interesting to me. I don't know if it's interesting to the viewers.
It's interesting.
My uncle was the dean of speech and theater at Syracuse University. In fact, he taught a very famous newscaster, Ted Koppel. He was,
Who knows Ted Koppel?
well,
in the
yeah,
US?
many years ago, but he was, yeah, and actually, Ray Irwin was a very distinguished theater professor. My father's younger brother.
Okay.
And then his younger sister, they received an inheritance from my grandfather, and they bought a hotel. So they had a hotel in Minneapolis, and they were hoteliers. So actually, yeah, that's how my cousin actually became a hotelier.
Are you close with them?
Well,
Your
they of
uncles?
course have passed away, because remember, my father was 24 years older than my mother. So they were, of course, would be much older now.
That's right. I guess so.
But
So
my
both your
cousins,
uncle, so both your uncle and your aunt have gone.
right?
Passed.
But their kids, I'm
close with
close to one, Greg, who lives in Istanbul, who followed his parents' business and became a hotelier and worked in hotels all around the world. And he lived abroad. He lived outside the United States all his life, and so did I. So, so we're really close. And we're named after the same uncle, Greg. We're both named after our uncle Greg, who never married.
and he's
and
he's the
who-
oldest.
He was, right.
He was the oldest, because then it's his sister, and then your father.
Right, exactly. Oh, no. My father was the oldest.
Oh, your father was the oldest. So then Uncle Greg came second.
Actually,
was it daughter?
Sorry, it's a little confusing. I'm sorry. We were named after Uncle Greg, who was a great uncle.
Oh, a great uncle. Okay, so
yeah,
it wasn't
exactly.
your immediate. Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a little, but it was kind of complicated story. But so then I went to New York. I went to this high school trip and decided, okay, I'll be an actor. And my aunt and uncle said they'll pay for my tuition. So, but they only wanted to pay for my tuition at the University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire, where I lived. So I, of course, wanted to go to Juilliard, and I wrote to all these schools. I wrote to the American Academy of Dramatic Art. I wrote to schools in London. I was getting all these pamphlets in the mail, and my father would would see them in the mail, and he'd laugh, and think, well, "You're not going to London for college. You're not going to Juilliard, So you're going to the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire."
Did your brother and sister go?
Yeah, they went there as well. Okay. And we all got music scholarships because we could all sing.
And did they get degrees in that as well, in music?
No, they didn't. They ended up, my sister ended up going into social work.
And your brother?
And my brother ended up leaving college and doing my father's business, basically.
And you got a degree in?
Well, actually, I'm called what was called a non-traditional student. So I started at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire as a music major because I had the tuition from my aunt and uncle, and I also got a scholarship from a singing scholarship. And the first year of college, I was cast in a director's musical. I was cast as Jesus in Godspell. So I guess it went to my head. I thought, oh, I can do this. I mean, I've got Jesus.
It's my first part. I'm good to go.
I got Jesus. I could sure be a star on Broadway. So I decided I'm changing my major to theater, and the closest I could move to was Minneapolis, because Minneapolis had a really good theater department, actually. They have the Guthrie Theater there, which is and Chanhassen Musical Theater, which is in the Midwest, it's really actually well known. Mm-hmm. So I told my aunt and uncle and my parents I'm moving to Minneapolis, and of course they were completely against that. They were against me even moving to Minneapolis, let alone New York. But they finally agreed. I went to Minneapolis, and then
They paid.
Yeah, and I switched to theater, and then I was in a musical out west called the Medora Musical, which is really, you should look it up online. It's still a big deal, actually. And I got cast in this musical, and the lighting girl fell in love with me, J.J. Pyle. I mean, we fell in love with each other. Okay. We moved in together. And then it was during those years as a theater major in Minneapolis that I realized, wow, I can't marry, I really can't get married. I mean, this is not going to work. I have to get out of this situation somehow.
Why? You didn't like her?
No, because of my sexuality.
Okay,
I couldn't exactly
she didn't know? She didn't know?
No, not in those days.
I got you, I hear you.
Right, this was like the old days.
Okay.
So
how long did you date her?
We lived together for, I think, 2 years. And then I was a senior at the University of Minnesota at a theater major, and I had appeared in, really small parts at the Guthrie Theater, and I really had a kind of good thing going. I got professional singing jobs from the time I was 19, singing in a small dinner theater there and stuff. But I had this hanging over me, like, what am I going to do about this relationship? This was a different time.
I hear you.
So I went to a play, and at the intermission, I saw this girl, Mary Jo, who I really was not even close to. And she was like, Greg, I'm moving to Hawaii for winter quarter, because the University of Minnesota at that time was divided into 3 quarters, not 2 semesters. Okay. So let's take off winter quarter and come to Hawaii with me. And I was...
Well, she was hitting on you too?
Yeah, I was like 21 years old. I know. I was doing pretty well.
But you sang and everything else. Everybody wanted to be with you, of course.
Thank you. She's like, let's go to Hawaii. We really didn't, And at the time, I went back to the play, and I remember the whole rest of the play. I thought, that's it. This is going to solve everything. I'm just going to move to Hawaii. And I'd never really seen a warm ocean. I'd never really been anywhere. And it was Minnesota, Minneapolis in January. So I just decided I called my parents and said, I'm moving to Hawaii and leaving college.
Now, how old are you now?
You know, when
20?
you look at this, how crazy, you know, you
Were
look
you
back.
20? Were you 20?
I was just probably just turned 20, 21.
Okay. So you did it. You left.
Yeah, so I
But
left
what
college.
about your girlfriend, first of all?
Yeah, so I told JJ, you know, I came out to her, and then I decided to.
And how did she respond?
Told her I was
How did she respond?
badly.
Okay.
Very badly.
You still remember that? Okay.
Yeah, and I moved to Hawaii just like that. And that's why I'm in Japan today. You know, it's fascinating. I was always planning on going to New York eventually.
But didn't go to New York.
Yeah.
You got sidetracked.
Got sidetracked.
To Hawaii.
They call it a geographical. I did a geographical.
Geographical, okay. So you went there and stayed there for how long?
So I moved to Hawaii, and I got a job. You know, I was just a kid. I think I probably had like $500 when I went.
But you didn't finish college either.
Not exactly. Not at the
Okay.
time.
Not at the time, okay.
So I still needed to finish college. I had a music major and a theater major. And all I took was theater classes. You know, I hadn't taken any of the important things you need to take. And it's this Mary Jo, who I went to Hawaii with. She's like, it's okay, you know, we really had a good time. I mean, I really had a blast in my 20s. And she was like, let's just drive those PediCabs in Waikiki. They had these rickshaw things, bicycle things.
Right.
And we could make like 70, if you were lucky, $100 a day driving those things. So I was just a kid, and I would like wear really short shorts, and it was kind of sexy probably in those days.
Wait, how did she know about your sexuality?
Yeah, it didn't matter. We didn't have a relationship.
I thought you, okay. I thought she liked you. I thought
we were just friends.
Okay, I hear you. Okay.
So in Waikiki, there were all the Japanese there. It was the 80s.
Right.
And so the first Japanese I learned was norimasenka. Could you ride my pedicab? And I was norimasenka, norimasenka, norimasenka. And then there were the Japanese. I mean, they were all coming to Hawaii in the 80s. It was right pre-bubble. And I just fell in love with the Japanese. They were so wonderful. They would get in my pedicab. They would open their wallets, you know, with $100,000. How much was the ride? I never took advantage of them.
But you just thought, my goodness.
Yeah. And I grew up, you know, in a home with, as I said, with a lot of conflict. Mm-hmm. When my father drank, he was a violent drunk. So I grew up with that kind of a violent father. Mm. So always horrified, you know, that something would happen. You never knew
what was going to happen, right?
Yeah. So, and the Japanese character suits my character. They were very complacent. They don't like arguments. Mm-hmm. They don't like, you know, and I sensed my people.
I hear you. No, I
kind of, you know what I mean?
I understand, yeah. They're conflict averse.
Yeah. So
that was your whole life.
So I just fell in love with the Japanese. I mean, in my early 20s, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. But at that time, the Vietnamese boat people were coming out of Vietnam. Really? Okay. It was show my age. Okay. But so I did work for refugee resettlement for 3 years during that time in Hawaii, which really exposed me to Asia. And there were a lot of volunteers there who had lived in Asia like you and me, Lance, mm-hmm. and then they moved back to Hawaii. Right. And they wanted to do something, so they volunteered at this refugee resettlement company. And then I met a lot of older people who had lived in Asia all their life, and they were like, Greg, you should go to Asia. Asia is the place to be, blah, blah, blah. So when I was 26, a Japanese guy named Kimikazu Kitayama came up to me on the street in Waikiki and said, I'm looking for a job. Could you help me get a job? It was just a chance meeting. I also met Tony Bennett. I mean, I have a lot of funny stories. Like in Waikiki, Tony Bennett came up to me and was like, and asked me, you know, he was looking for some magazine. It was Sunday morning. You know, I really had a lot of interesting experiences now. When in those days,
you knew who he was when you saw him.
Yeah, and in those days you didn't have a cell phone to take a selfie, right?
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
But anyway, Kimikazu asked me, you know, Greg, I really need a job. You know, I'm a student here and I don't have a visa to work. Could you help me? And I helped him get a job. This is many years ago, so it's okay. So, and then he asked me, would you please come to Japan and stay with me in the summer? for 3 months. And I was 26 years old, and I still believed I was going to move back to New York, and I was going to finish school and
Go on Broadway.
and be the Broadway star, which you...
But it's possible, you never know, you know.
Could have happened. So, and me being young and carefree, I thought, why not? I should go to Japan. I love the Japanese people. So I moved here when I was 26 years old, many, many years ago. And for the first 3 years, I lived here 3 years in Tokyo. I worked at the opening of Tokyo Disneyland. I was the first cast. And then I worked, of course, teaching English like everybody did. And before I came to Japan, I went to visit a guy at the University of Hawaii. I told him I'm a singer. Where could you work? This is interesting because it's kind of related to you. I'm like, where could you work in Japan as a singer? I asked him. And he gave me a list of 5 places. He's like, you can try the Sano Hotel.
Right.
Try the Tokyo American Club.
Right.
And I tried 2 others, forgive me, I forgot.
Right. Okuda maybe?
Okuda maybe, yeah.
Maybe
probably
Okuda
Hotel, you got it right, exactly.
He'd say Okuda.
And then, anyway,
and he might say Nuotani.
Nuotani. And the last place was, if you can't get a job singing anywhere, try this place called Romi's Roppongi. It's a hostess club in Roppongi. Try that. So I came to Japan with Kimikazu, and I went to the Sano Hotel. You know,
it was Nakasaka then.
I was a kid, yeah. But they had an African American guy singing there, and they introduced me to him. He was like, you know, are you kidding me?
This is my job.
You're gonna take my job? Some 26-year-old kid from Wisconsin?
That's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. So I really was aggressive. I went to the American Club, you know, and I think I met the president at the time. Who knows what he was? And they were like, well, no, you know, we don't have a regular singer. Bob Collins, you know, we don't have a regular singer. And everybody said no. So I went. Finally, I called this Romi's, and I said, could I come down and audition? She's like, yeah, come down. And I auditioned, and I sang. I had a guitar. I sang a couple songs. Okay. Yeah, I sang a couple songs, and she was like, "You're hired tomorrow night. From tomorrow night, you can start working." So I worked for 3 years that whole time.
So she sponsored you and everything.
Yeah, during that time, working as a singer in a nightclub.
That is so good.
It's a long story. I mean,
but most people come here.
A long and winding road.
Right, but you know how difficult it is, even in those days.
Yeah.
To be able to come here and get a job and someone to sponsor you.
So nice. And I guess, but I look back now and I think, you know, I spent my 20s, you know, 21 to 26 in Hawaii, just having fun. I mean, and I know a lot of Japanese, I've told who kind of envy me, and they're like, wow, I spent my 20s at a company or something, you know. They right away go into this really structured company, whereas I just had the wonderful memories of my time in Hawaii, and also my first 3 years in Japan. I mean, that was really the glory days of Japan. I mean, the working in a nightclub, working at Tokyo Disneyland. I mean, I really had a wonderful time.
Did you ever leave? Have you ever left?
Oh yeah, so of course. So I stayed 3 years and I left Japan. Yeah.
To go where?
In those days, Grandpa Greg here. In those days, back in the good old days. You did the backpacking in Asia. So a lot of people, they came to Japan, the foreigners would go around and they'd backpack all over Asia. And then they'd run out of money. And then after they ran out of money, they'd come to Japan because anybody they thought could make money in Japan in those days. So I met a lot of those backpackers. So I felt I never got to do the backpacking thing. So I left Japan and I did the backpacking around Asia. Went to all those countries with the backpack, with the money in the money belt, and stayed.
How long did you do that?
I did it for 6 months.
You didn't like that?
Oh, I had a wonderful time.
You enjoyed it?
I ran out of money. Oh, great memory. Amazing. I mean, I look back now, amazing. Okay. The things I did were amazing.
Where did you go? Name the places you went in
I started out in Singapore, and, you know, just Singapore, Malaysia. I spent 2 months in Thailand. You know, doing the Thailand thing. Okay, right. Went to Myanmar, Hong Kong, China, and then I ran out of money and went back to. So I thought I got to go back to Hawaii. Right. I went back to Hawaii, immediately got a job working in a very high-end men's clothing store at the Hyatt Regency.
Okay.
And I wasn't there like a week, and this multimillionaire came in the store, and a Japanese, of course, and I helped him because I could speak Japanese a little because I lived there 3 years. And he was like, "Would you please be my interpreter in Hawaii?" So it's, I'm like, sure. So I was an interpreter for Mr. Ishikawa, who was one of the big bubble real estate guys who had bought up all kind of incredible. So I really had a really good time with Mr. Ishikawa, as you can imagine, being his interpreter. Well, I just gone back to Hawaii, really. I met him right away. And then he had bought a lot of condos in Hawaii at the time. They changed the law afterwards that you couldn't buy 3 or 4 or 5 condos in the same building. And then he heard me sing. Again, it's all, it's such a blessing being a singer. He's like, "You should be a famous singer in Japan. I mean, I'm going to bring you back to Japan and make you, you should be a famous Enka singer." Because I could sing a couple of Japanese songs, really. So I went back to Japan with him, and they tried to, what's the word? I mean, I got a manager.
I understand. They tried to make you Enka singer. Yes.
Yeah. And Jiro, there was an African American
who came in
he made it, as an Enka singer. Oh, I mean, he really had a big break. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But I came back to Japan, and they had me tour around the hot springs with a bunch of older Enka singers. So it really was not a good situation. And I realized, no, this is not a good situation. So I decided to go back to the University of Hawaii, because so I really only stayed in Japan that time around 6 months, doing the Enka hot spring tour. I mean, it was crazy. That's a crazy story too. I mean, I would be in a room like with 6 elderly Enka singers, and after our performance, they would drink heavily and snore. And
fall asleep.
Oh, it was awful. So I went back to the University of Hawaii and majored in Japanese finally. And there I had incredible teachers. We had the Kabukiza come. We had Donald Ritchie, who was a film expert. All of the real Japanophiles came and taught at the University of Hawaii because they all wanted to be in Hawaii, I think, and take that. The University of Hawaii offered them a really good package. So after leaving the University of Hawaii, I decided, I always wanted to move to New York, but it was just the temptation was too strong to come back to Japan. So I moved back to Japan in 1988, and it's been here ever since. I started voiceover industry and being a master of ceremonies.
Yeah, that's right. Let's get it. What are you doing now? What are you doing now? What occupies your days?
Well, now I have 3 occupations, basically. I'm a singer, right? I was asked after I came back to Japan to translate a whole genre of Japanese music, which is called Japanese Dou-yoh music. This music was created in the 1920s, the 1930s, actually. And it was a genre of music purposely created to be used in music education in the Japanese schools, because they didn't have songs in Japan. They didn't have the really good songs to be used in music education in Japan at the time. So they purposely created this genre called doyo music. And someone asked me many, many years ago, would I translate 10 of the songs? Because I also wrote songs, and I wrote, in Japan you can do anything, so I put songwriter on my business card, which I was, but I never pursued it in LA, or in America you really have to live in LA or Nashville, or maybe New York to do songwriting. So I translated 10 of these traditional Japanese doyo songs. This was in the early 90s when I came back. And the producer who asked me to translate them was just blown away. It's like, actually, after I translated them and sang 10 of them, recorded 10 of them, he said, "You just found the reason you moved to Japan. This is the reason you're here." And at the time, I thought it was just a gig, but it really turned out to be very true. So now I've translated and written English words for 100 of those songs. They're on iTunes.
You've done 100?
Yeah, at least over 100. And then they're amazing songs, and they're beautiful in English. They're just as beautiful in English.
Are you singing all of these songs?
Yeah. So in the 90s...
No, I'm saying this is
yeah.
The over 100 songs that you have translated.
Yes.
On iTunes, it's your voice?
Yes.
My
Singing
goodness.
the songs, yeah. They're not all on iTunes, but
I
there's
understand.
probably at least 35, 40.
Can you find it on YouTube as well? I'm sure you can.
Yeah,
Okay.
YouTube and iTunes, yeah.
Wow.
So, and I did that really a lot in the 90s. I was really focused, as they call it, a doyo singer. In those days, we had Tokyo and New York were sister cities. They're not anymore. But so we even had a doyo concert at Lincoln Center in New York. So that was, and they asked me, of course, because I was the only guy who could speak English. So that was my New York debut. I got to perform my music at Lincoln Center, which was just mind-blowing and really kind of a full circle, because I'd always wanted to do the New York thing.
That's right.
And I finally went there from Japan and
That's right. And you got
performed.
there and you
Yeah,
sang
and it was really cool. We had a sold-out concert because in the 90s, there were about 50,000 Japanese living in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So they all wanted to come to this concert and hear this traditional Japanese music. So I really feel in the future now, I mean, I want to focus more on bringing these Japanese doyo songs.
There's a lot more. How many songs
in English?
total are there?
Oh, there's probably 200. I've
So
done
you're
about half.
So you're almost there.
But they should be used in education abroad. They should
I
be
see.
used in the United
Well,
States,
there's
Australia,
such a big interest,
England.
Such a big interest in Japanese now. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So I do that as a singer, and then
Job number two.
Number two is I'm a voice actor. I've always been a voice actor in Japan since I came back that time. When I was in Hawaii, going to the University of Hawaii, a Japanese friend of mine was like, "You're so talkative. You should be on the radio." So just come to the radio station. So I came to the radio station, and I was just like this interview. I'm like, what am I going to do? His name was Gary Utagawa, and Gary was like, "Just sit there, and then when the red light comes on, just talk." So I was on Gary's program, and the red light came on. And I'm like, "Hi, Gary, how you doing?" And so for 2 years, I worked as a DJ on a Japanese radio station when I was in Hawaii. So when I came back to Japan, I auditioned actually for different radio stations. It was very hard to get a job at the time on a big radio station like Tokyo FM or FM Yokohama. That's what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And finally, I found a contest, and then I won the contest. So I was able to get a radio program. And then from the radio program, I learned about the voiceover industry. So I've been a voice actor in Tokyo for many, many, many years.
For what kind of for what kind of things? Like what?
Well, the biggest thing that voice actors in Japan do is we do the promotional materials for Japanese companies to be used abroad, like Sony, Panasonic, these major Japanese companies.
That's big, isn't it?
Yeah, they make a lot of their advertising we make it here, and then it's to be used abroad. And then, of course, we make educational materials as well, and sometimes TV commercials. I've done my most famous was You Got Mail. I was the You Got Mail guy in Japan. Okay. The ANA, I did ANA. Now I'm actually on Taiwan Airlines, because the president of a new airline called Starlux Airlines heard my voice on ANA. And the voiceover industry is, it's been a consistent job for me, which has been really great.
That's going to stop.
No, that's great. Yeah.
Yes, it may with AI.
Yeah, with AI.
Because
yeah.
AI is coming in and it will translate automatically. That's right. You have about a decade, maybe.
Maybe left. And also, to be
right.
really honest, the voiceover industry in Japan is really flooded. personally, it's just my opinion, we have so many voice actors now. Whereas originally when I started voice acting, voice actors were voice actors. We were like people that were entertainers or actors or voice people.
You know Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry.
Soros,
Yeah,
yes.
I watched hers. I heard her interview.
She's fantastic.
She's
she
great.
She does a lot of voice acting.
Hear her everywhere.
She's really all the trains from Narita into Tokyo and everywhere. She's really good.
She is awesome.
I've known her for a long time.
But yeah, so now we have so many voice actors because everybody started. Well, what happened was the agents, the model agencies, realized, well, wait a minute, we can get into voice acting too. So they literally advertised for all their models. We'll make your voice samples. We'll make your tape, your recordings. And so it really flooded the industry. So like, for example, if you're up for an American male voice, like which is my voice, there might be like 40 people they're choosing from. So it's really like a lottery to get the job. But I speak Japanese, so I get a lot of these kind of Japanese speaking jobs. But my other main job is Master of Ceremonies.
Okay.
And I started being a Master of Ceremonies because a friend of mine, this is a long story, but it's probably too long to tell this story, but she asked me to be her Master of Ceremonies when Bill Clinton's brother, Roger Clinton, came to Japan. And she's a funny story. She too was like, a lot of us live in Japan, we have these crazy stories. And when Bill Clinton was president of the United States, she was doing really, really well. And she had a big party at the Akasaka Prince. And she told me and a friend of mine, I want to bring Bill Clinton and Greg, could you arrange that? We're like, he's the president of the United States.
Is she still here?
She's still here, yeah.
Okay, wait.
And she's like, I know he's the president. Just everybody's got a price. What's his price? So we convinced her that we couldn't bring Bill Clinton to the Japan while he was the sitting president of the United States. So this is a really funny story. So she said, well, does he have any family members? And Bill only has a half brother, Roger. Roger's a great guy. So she decided to bring Roger. And they asked me would I translate for Roger while he was here. So I went shopping actually for Hillary. We went to the Oriental Bazaar. We bought her the most expensive plate. I wonder if she still has it. I watched.
You mean when you were with Roger?
With Roger, yeah.
He wanted to buy her some gifts.
Yeah, he bought gifts for everybody, and actually we had a really wonderful time. He's a blast. Yeah, there's no more fun person than Roger. We had the most wonderful time. But then that was really the first time I did a major MC job. She asked me to MC this party with Roger, and then Debbie Sukarno, who is a very well-known, she was the wife of Sukarno, the leader of Indonesia. She's a big celebrity in Japan. She actually came to that party, and then she asked me to MC her events, and that was like 21 years ago. And at the time, she was even today. She's huge. I started doing her events, and then I became a Master of Ceremonies. And then about 12 years ago, a friend of mine said to me, "Greg, you're a Master of Ceremonies. You speak Japanese. Why aren't you doing the wedding reception Master of Ceremonies?" And in the United States and Japan or other countries, it's quite different. In America, where we're from, just a friend does like a very casual MC. But in Japan, the wedding reception is extremely structured. It's a very serious event of the two families, really the first and the only event that the two families do together. And so it's taken very, very seriously. So they need a Master of Ceremonies to introduce like the president of the companies, and it's a long story. But anyway, I started doing that job 12 years ago, and now it's my main thing.
That's the main thing you do.
I love it. It's just, beautiful. I love doing it. You meet first of all, they choose you, if the couple chooses you as an MC, and then you meet them and you plan their reception. I love people. They're both, the couples are young and in love, and it's a really joyous thing. It's not like a light job. I mean, you can't make a mistake.
That's true.
Some people don't like to do it at all because it's highly stressful. You're working very high-end hotels. There's a lot of money being spent.
And a lot of people there are in really high positions too.
Yeah.
So
and you have to introduce their boss.
That's right.
I've introduced major people have come, and then you cannot make any tiny, and that's a very unfortunate thing about Japan. It's not all paradise here.
Right.
Is that, Japan doesn't really, as a society as a whole, they don't really they're not good with mistakes. And I think, and that's probably why Japanese people have a difficult time learning English, because they're so horrified that they're going to make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And in the wedding industry is as well, you can't make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So but I've learned how to deal with that and not make mistakes.
What do you see for your future here?
My future, I hope I could continue doing this wedding reception MC, because I love, who said, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Isn't that the truth?
And I really feel like that. I love that job. It's just wonderful. And I really love doing that, and I love singing the doyo. And especially now, we're really going through a hard time in the world right now. The pandemic has just really exhausted everyone. We have this conflict right now in Ukraine and Russia, which is just adding more stress. There's so much stress in the world. So I really would like to focus on this music, this traditional Japanese doyo music. And because maybe that's all we can do. You can't change the world, but you can do what you were given, a gift, right? You can give your gift to others. So I feel maybe that Japanese doyo is a gift that I have that I can give to the world. So I hope to focus on that.
That is beautiful. Greg, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's been so great.
It's been a blast going back through the years, remembering my life.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah. I hope someone got something out of it. Yeah.
I used to shake everyone's hand. Thank you so much, Greg.
Your buddy. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like, subscribe, and please remember, it's all on loan. Continue to reach for the stars, and you're too blessed to be stressed. Thank you for watching this episode. Be sure to subscribe, and someday, maybe I'll have you on.